It's hard to become number one, but you know what's tougher? Staying at number one. Just ask Apple. They dominated the tech industry for more than a decade. Phones, tablets, laptops, you name it, Apple set the standard. But now the company is struggling. Look at their latest revenue report. From January to March, Apple made $90.8 billion. That's revenue, not profits, $90.8 billion. It was 4% down compared to last year. Most of their products are not selling. iPhone sales are down by 10%. iPad sales have fallen by 17%. And wearable sales are down by 10%. So only two bright spots remain. That's services like Apple TV and Apple Music, and their computer, Mac. Everything else is stalling. Do you know what's worse? The global market is not that bad. Globally, smartphone shipments are up by 10%, but iPhone sales are down 10%. So clearly, it's not an industry problem, it's an Apple problem. But why is it happening? A couple of reasons. The first is the slowdown in China. iPhone sales dropped around 8% in China, mostly because of competition. Huawei is eating into Apple's market. Huawei profits surged 560% in the same period, 560%. Another reason is legal troubles. Apple is facing antitrust lawsuits in two key markets, that is Europe and the US. The European Union fined Apple around $2 billion. The US is accusing them of monopolizing the market, and both cases have dented Apple's books. The company says they will turn things around. They have a special event slated for next week. A new iPad is going to be launched, plus the new iPhone will come out later this year. Rumor is it will have a lot of AI magic. If that's the case, maybe Apple can make a comeback. But their struggles do raise some important questions, like what does it take to lead an industry? How have other leaders fared? And what role do personalities play? Let's look at examples from the past. The phone market looked very different in the 1990s and 2000s. Nokia was the industry leader. Their peak was around 2008. They made up almost 39% of all mobile phone sales. Samsung was at second place. Now cut to 2012. Samsung overtook Nokia. They had 22% of the market. Nokia had around 19%. So a new industry leader emerged. Again, cut to 2023. This time, Apple overtook Samsung. They had around 20% of the smartphone market. Samsung had 19%. So let's recap this race. From 1998 to 2012, Nokia led the market. From 2012 to 2023, Samsung led the market, and then Apple took over. Nokia's reign lasted around 14 years. Samsung's lasted around 11. Let's look at another industry, photography. For many decades, photography meant one company, Kodak. In 1976, they made up 90% of the US market, 9-0. It was virtually a monopoly. But gradually, competitors emerged like Fujifilm, Nikon, and Canon. By 1999, Kodak's market share was 27%. By 2005, it was 25%. Still, Kodak was a market leader. That would only change in 2010 when Canon overtook them. Today, Canon makes up almost 50% of the digital camera market, and Kodak, they filed for bankruptcy in 2012. So Kodak's reign lasted for more than 2 decades, but it was not a thriving reign, it was a slow death. Another example is Blockbuster, a movie rental chain in the US. Their first shop opened in 1985, and in 20 years, they had 9,000 locations. Blockbuster dominated the US entertainment industry, but in 2010, they went bust. They were swamped by the OTT wave. The likes of Netflix and Amazon swept them aside. So Blockbuster reigned for around 2 decades. Do you know what's common about all these 3 examples? Innovation, or the lack of it. Nokia could not innovate, not like Samsung and Apple did. These companies brought touch screens and high-quality cameras. So Nokia lost its crown. Kodak also could not innovate. While others moved to digital cameras, Kodak was still stuck with films. By the time they transitioned, it was too late. Same with Blockbuster. They did not ride the digital wave. In the year 2000, in fact, Netflix asked Blockbuster to buy them out, and that too for just $50 million, but Blockbuster denied. Today, Netflix is worth $240 billion. It tells a story, doesn't it? To lead an industry, you need to stay ahead of the curve. You need to keep evolving. Experts say technology doubles every 2 years. For example, cameras become twice as good in 2 years. Processors become twice as good in 2 years. So do touchscreens and batteries. If you don't keep up, you will be outdated. In 10 years' time, you will be a generation behind the rest. Which also brings us to leadership. Do personalities play a role here? Yes, they do. Being a manager is one thing. Being a visionary is another. Just look at Steve Jobs. He wanted to disrupt the mobile phone industry. He made technology look like magic, which is why Apple moved up the ladder. But today that magic is missing. Tim Cook took over as Apple CEO in 2011. Listen to an interview he gave around that time. And I'm going to quote, "We argue and debate like crazy about what we are going to do, because we know that we can only do a few things great. That means not doing a bunch of things that would be really good and really fun." There are two ways of looking at it. First, Tim Cook is a steady hand. He has looked after the bottom line. He's expanded to new markets. He's also kept shareholders happy, which is all true. But at what cost? He himself said that Apple is not doing a bunch of things that would be really good. Is that trade-off affecting Apple? Perhaps it is. And it also tells you why leadership matters, because leaders give you direction. They decide what the company will focus on, consolidation or innovation. Apple reached the top by innovating. Their focus on consolidation could be their downfall.